Davening takeaway, Torah Ohr, Daf Samach Zayin. There is a very powerful mimer on this daf that relates to davening. And in fact, it's somewhat of a process that's described on how we can reach the levels in davening that we should be reaching. And it's in there, it explains that one could have, some meditation, his bonus, and realizing how wonderful God's creations are and all the multitudinous and diversity, and how God is the life of all those things and how amazing that is. And yet with that meditation, we can still be confined and not feel this inspiration or the sense of being one with Hashem, and the aspect of bittul that we've mentioned a few times, the idea of sublimating into Hashem's greater being and experiencing that awareness and that love that comes from that. And that's because of the body and the nefesh bahamis that surrounds it. And in the Mimer explains that Abraham, he was able to overcome it, and with that tremendous love, be completely united with Hashem, and so much batul to Hashem, so much sublimating into Hashem, that he was known as a merkava, like a chariot or a vehicle that just served Hashem in a seamless way. And it explains that how did Abraham do that? He not only just viewed the diversity of the world and all that amazingness that we know comes from Hashem, and Hashem gives life to it, but we also add a second hisbonenus, another kind of meditation, realizing that God is above everything, and he's so great and so beyond infinite that not even a thought can grasp Hashem. Leis machshava tevisa beklal. And that level, from there comes now trickling down into the aspect of malchus. And from that aspect of malchus, now from there is generated all the creations and everything from spiritual to physical, in a way of just a glint or a little ray of light that comes off. And now we've seen this show up in a number of different places, and we've talked about it. I want to address in a little more detail here the differences and how this mimer actually reflects that in its description. That in Pesukei de Zimra, as we've said, that this is a world related to the Olam HaYetzira. Olam HaYetzira is connected with character traits, character with emotions, mitos, and how we can have a sensation of wow, like viewing a beautiful piece of art or a beautiful scene that just sort of, it doesn't necessarily reflect any close analysis. It reflects being just, it sort of passes by that into direct inspiration. In there, we talked about the fact that there are places, including we've mentioned the fourth one of the Halalukas, where the description of the heavenly realms and the physical realms, and it's just simply merely a glint of Hashem and how Hashem is much greater than that. We see a parallel in that and in general things that go on in Pesukei de Zimra in a broad way with after Baruch Hu, which we leave Yetzirah and go into the world of Bria. And as I explained, that in the world of Bria, I like to describe it more as the analysis of science, or a scientist looking at something and digging deeper into the details, first in an intellectual way, then bringing out then the emotion from that. And so we see that after Baruch Hu, the first thing we say actually is Yotzer Or Uborei Choshech, that Hashem forms the light and creates darkness. And so that's a hint at the previous world of Yetzirah, Yotzer, Yetzirah, where there's light, where in that sense, where there's light generated almost immediately from the experience, the lighting up our soul. In Bria, Borei Choshech, there's a darkness. We've moved into a new realm, a higher realm that requires more analysis and more digging into to experience the amazingness that's there. And so we see that immediately after that, there's a series of descriptions of how the world works, the different, physical and the physical heavens. And then from there, it transitions into spiritual beings, the angels, our souls, things like that. And so we see and this is actually mentioned in the Mimer, which is fascinating in this particular place in the in Torah Ohr, that it describes the difference between a creation from Hashem that's related to, shall we say, the action, the ma'aseh yadecha, the actions of your hand, and how an action of one's hand is so removed from the essence of who we are that even when we create something, let's say we make a piece of pottery or something, and we let go, that pottery stands there. And by looking at the pottery, one can't discern the essence of the soul that it came from. That's how far removed it is. And this is how all these creations are so far removed from Hashem's essence. But there's another another aspect. It's also just a glint in ha'ara coming from Hashem's malchus, and that is by terming it shame, a name. So just like a name is an external, like a glint or a ray of who we are in our essence, still a name, unlike an action of the hands, a name still has a connection back to that essence. So much so that we see that by calling somebody's name, they turn their consciousness, they move towards it. If someone's unconscious and someone calls the name, many times we can wake them up from that unconsciousness. And so the name, albeit very external, does have a connection back in. And those are related to the spiritual realms, the angels, the malachim, the souls, the neshamas. And we see that reflected in the davening, that we see that in the first blessing, Ltzet Ohr, we see that there's a expression that says, Tisborech Hashem Elokeinu b'shamayim mima'al v'al ha'aretz mitochas al kol shevach ma'aseh yodecha, that we are going to praise Hashem, our God, from with the amazingness of the heavens and above and all the earth down here below, all the praise from ma'aseh yodecha, from the work actions of your hands. And that's related to that lower level, more distant level. But when we get to a deeper level of shame, it says the very next paragraph that it says here, Tisborech, another similar parallel kind of description. Tisborech lenetzach tzurenu malkeinu v'gayolenu barek kadeshim yishtabach shimecha la'ad malkeinu. That we see that now when we're praising Hashem by His name, and the name is what is going to be reflected that way. And so we see now that even though, yes, it is still distant, Hashem is beyond all, we're a little more fine-tuning what that distance means and how it's praised in the fine different levels of what it is. And that analysis only brings us to a greater awe and love of Hashem, and how Hashem is greater than everything. And again, no thought can even touch Hashem. And so this now leads up directly to Shema, that we can then bring about a Moshe Nefesh. We can actually have a Mesiras Nefesh, as it were, self-sacrifice, giving ourselves over to that oneness, the unity of Hashem, and being being absorbed into that oneness of Hashem as He is one with everything. And so the question then in the Mimer is that how do we were not Avraham Avinu, we've been inherited things from Avraham Avinu, but how can we experience what Avraham Avinu experienced? And the Mimer goes on to explain that we need one more element that helps us. And that element is Torah. And learning of Torah, if we learn it in the proper way, and the Mimer goes into detail as far as what that way is, it's a high level of the point where when we are reading Torah, we now have a consciousness that we are just repeating that which Hashem said. So the things that are going through our mouth, from our brain through our mouth, that is actually now the high level of what Hashem in His highest level, the Anochi, the supreme oneness, that essence of Hashem, now is communicating through us. And that level of bittul, being able to nullify ourselves that way, that now gives us that bittul to now be able to have the hisbonenus, the meditations and the davening, to allow us to reach the sublime level of recognizing Hashem's oneness and being included in that oneness. And if I can mention that, in there that it talks about different levels of Torah, but we know that the essence of the Torah, which then will give us even a better ability to bring that consciousness of learning Torah there, that essence of the Torah is the Torah of Chassidus, which we're actually learning now. The Torah Ohr is Torah Chassidus. And so by learning Chassidus, that will enable us in the most straightforward way to allow that process to happen, that we can position ourselves mentally, spiritually, in their consciousness to then allow that process of davening to be accomplished in the highest way it can be. And so it's interesting that amongst the Hasidim, we have a strong custom. In fact, in the yeshivas, we do this as a regular part of the daily schedule, that we learn Hasidus before davening. So there is Torah learning every day before davening. Anyone says that anyone who's been through the yeshiva system should be learning an hour every day. If not, then at least an hour Monday and Thursday. But that learning Hasidus before davening is so crucial to putting ourselves in the position to allow ourselves to experience the davening, similar to the way Avraham Avinu started it and started that process of the way the Jewish people can be, and allowing that greatest, highest level of the davening.